This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, the brilliant writer Amy Aniobi, is a supervising producer on the hit HBO comedy Insecure with the awesome Issa Rae. She also has a project in development at Amazon with Jill Soloway's Topple Productions. Her past produced credits include NBC's Trial and Error, HBO's Silicon Valley, NBC's The Michael J. Fox Show, and web series Lisa and Amy Are Black, The Slutty Years, and Awkward Black Girl. She hails from North Texas, graduated from Stanford University and UCLA, and aside from spending time living in New York, the Bay Area, and LA, she's lived abroad in France and Morocco. She enjoys travel, baking, cookies, and the occasional well-timed "that's what she said." It really is a great delight and true pleasure for me to welcome to StoryBeat my friend and fellow Bruin alum, Amy Aniobi. So glad you could join us on StoryBeat today, Amy. Welcome.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. Oh. And I loved your voice on that intro. It's so good.
It's I've been doing it a little bit, so I've got a clue. So let's talk about how you do what you do in this business. Obviously, you've, in a relatively short time, made quite a wonderful mark in the world of TV comedy. How long have you been writing comedy? Have you always had a knack for it?
I've always had a passion, if not a knack. Since I was a kid and before I ever even knew that writing could be a job, I'm a middle child, overlooked middle, but I'm the girl, so spoiled. My older and younger brothers and I, when we were kids, we would write fake advertisements, like for Calvin Klein's new cologne called Aggression, and and we would just make up these things and perform them for my parents, and we would write songs together. I wrote a song once about my brother being an underwear man because he insisted on taking a bath with his underwear on. Oh. And so I'm when we were really young, and so I always really loved making fun of people and things, and maybe I didn't even know that it was comedic because I was also really studious and a big reader. And I didn't really open up to the fact that I was a comedy writer until college. And at Stanford, when I was an undergrad, there was this play called Gaieties, which is our yearly musical, and it makes fun of our rival school, Berkeley. It's a one-sided rivalry. Berkeley feels all the pain, and Stanford feels none of it. So we write this play every year to just kind of poke fun at the fact that they're so bitter, which is vicious and cruel. And I was a choreographer for 1 year. I was assistant choreographer and helped come up with all the dance moves. And then the year following that, I was a writer for the play. And we had a mini writer's room split up different ways. And I was pitching jokes. And it was one of those things where when the head writer started laughing and pitching my jokes back to me and being this is really funny, who came up with that? Mm-hmm. And I was oh my God, am I funny? And the thing that really unlocked it, I think, was seeing the movie Mean Girls.
Mean Girls.
Because I think I had kind of a guy sense of humor because of, growing up a total tomboy in North Texas. And then also just in general, my parents are Nigerian, I'm Nigerian. So I grew up explaining comedy shows to my parents, like Frasier and Friends, and why things were funny to them, and breaking down jokes for them. And but most shows back then were written and created by men, so they also had masculine senses of humor. And it wasn't until I saw Mean Girls, which is written by Tina Fey, starring Lindsay Lohan, pour one out. And we all I watched it with a bunch of friends, and I was this is how I talk. This is how all of my friends and I talk. And I have to, like, something, I saw it in the theater, and when it ended, I was just sitting there, and I was kind of like, girls are allowed to be funny? Girls can make jokes like this? And it just, like, I don't know, affected me. And I saw it 2 more times, and I feel like that was probably, after that was when I applied to write for Gaieties. And I was like, I want to do this. And that's where it sort of started, like this feeling like maybe I have a comedy bone. And in the beginning, like, I moved abroad for a couple of years to France, and I was writing while working at this cafe. And then I moved to LA, and I was working in reality TV, and, you know, none of it's real. So my job was coming up with stories for some of the reality shows.
Reality TV's all made up just like everything else.
Exactly. So it was a really fun job. My boss saw that I had like an inclination for like stories, and he was like, okay, come up with a pitch document with 1 or 2 stories for this like reality version, or this international version of like Cuden Kardashians. And he'd tell me to come up with 2 by the end of the day, and I'd come up with like 10. And he'd be like, cool, like, we're not going to do any of these. He's like, but great. Like, I'm glad you did that. Please answer my phone. But while I was working there, I was like, I just love coming up with stories. I love, like, looking for tension. I love making things funny. How do I do, like, I wish my hobby, this part of my job that nobody wants, I wish it could be my day job. And then a friend of mine was like, why not go to grad school? And I was like, who's going to pay for that pool? And he was like, the government. And I was like, oh. And so I'm obviously like completely from outside the industry. I'm from Texas. My family's Nigerian. I went to a quote unquote smart school. Like, there's no part of me that was ever, I guess, like destined to work in Hollywood. But,
and yet here you are. Clicked. And yet here you are. What kinds of comedy did you, aside from Mean Girls, did you grow up watching? What were your comedy Joneses?
Yeah, I mean, I was a total latchkey kid. Like, my brothers and I, we, like, raised ourselves because my parents were working. They're providing us our lives.
Right.
So very great parents. Love them dearly. They're amazing. And I was raised on television. I would, like, come home from school, like, I was in marching band in high school, so I would, like, marching band ended at 6, so I would come home usually about 6:15 and watch, like, the last 15 minutes and next half hour Friends. And then, you know, on Friday nights, it was all those Friday night shows, Step by Step,
sure,
Family Matters, The Cosby Show, and then I always watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and one of my favorite shows that I, like, lots of people maybe didn't watch was the Jamie Foxx show. My brothers and I taped almost every episode onto VHS.
Wow.
And we would watch it on the weekends. But I watched, obviously, like, you know, Frasier was a show that my family all watched together. But, yeah, a lot of, even though I just named a bunch of black shows, but it was more so a lot of white programming.
You were learning how to tell jokes. It didn't matter what color it was in.
Yeah, and so it was kind of interesting. I think in my house, because we were in America, my parents were, like, you know, trying to assimilate. We watched a lot of white TV, and it's one of those things where growing up, like, I never really remember, like, I didn't really see girlfriends until I was, like, in college, and it was just because, like, my parents were, like, trying to figure out who be white people. Like, it was like, how do you be that? And so we watched a lot of white TV, and then the black shows we did watch were, like, the big, you know, like, those standards that went on for way too long. Girlfriends went on for a really long time.
But back in those days, in those days, Amy, and even in these days, there are certainly more African American centric shows than ever before.
Sure.
But traditionally there weren't a lot of them. So you know if you're gonna learn how to be a writer for TV, in your case, you would watch what you needed to watch in order to understand how that worked.
Yeah, and I think if anything, what it kind of did help me with was the standards. And then once you know the rule, you can begin to break it.
Right.
And so I know when I watched, like, when I first got into, like, writing specs, like, I thought, you know, I wanted to get into, like, a program after college, like, go to one of these fellowship programs that the studios do. And every spec I would write, it was obviously for a mainstream #white show.
Sure.
But I always had a race element in there because I'm black. So I'm like, I'm not going to not write about race.
How How has your family's Nigerian background influenced you culturally in what you tell as stories? I think that's an interesting thing. I don't think there are probably a lot, I'm going to guess. I don't think there are a lot of Nigerian family-oriented people who wind up writing comedy in America. So,
there aren't.
How has that culture influenced what you do, how you tell stories?
So myself and also Yvonne Orji, who plays Molly on Insecure, she's Nigerian as well, and she has a family comedy based on a Nigerian family, and I love it. I love that we're in this time period where we can begin to tell stories based on specific experiences like that. For me, I think that one thing that it did teach me, my family is very close. Like that can happen when you're the only five. My family is five. We were like so solo in this like white neighborhood where I grew up. And until there's actually a big Nigerian community in Dallas, and now we have a lot of family members. But growing up, we were kind of alone, and as a result, we were very close. So I find thematically when I tell stories, it's about people looking for closeness. It's about people looking to unite with others, and it's also about world.
Interesting.
Because I definitely felt like when I was at school every day, I was in the white world. And then I go home and I was in the Nigerian world. And I was never really Texan. Like, it wasn't until I got to college and someone was like, do you own cowboy boots? And then I was like, oh, where are my cowboy boots? And literally I called my mom and I was like, Mom, can you buy me some cowboy boots? But I find that the stories that I'm attracted to are people who are genuinely like each other. Because I think getting through this life is about finding connection, and that's what I grew up experiencing was my family and like genuinely being into each other and supporting each other and wanting each other to succeed. And those are the friends that I have. I don't have frenemies, so it's sort of like that is something that attracts me. And then disappearing inside worlds, and I find because that's what my experience has been to a point that it took me a while to figure out what my voice was as a writer because my whole childhood was copying other people's voices. Sure. I just wanted to fit in. So I used other people's slang. I used the inflections that other people used when they talked. I dressed like my friends. I didn't know really who I was. I was whoever you wanted me to be. And because I was good at disappearing inside worlds. And that's why the shows that I love to write for, or the shows that I've been attracted to, like Silicon Valley is a world.
Love that show.
Is a world.
Love that show.
And even in between, I worked on a show that unfortunately didn't come to air called Brothers in Atlanta. It was about black guys in the radio, DJ music culture in Atlanta. That's a world. And so those are the type of stories that I am always going to be fascinated by because you can learn a world, and you can bring people inside it.
You're a world builder. That's what you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think almost less than a world builder as much as, I guess, a world knower, if that's a thing, because it's the worlds that exist. It's like I'm almost like, hey, guys, this has always been here, and you haven't been looking, so come with me and see it. Those are the types of things that I like to write. Because, Silicon Valley is a place that has been here, and it's been thriving.
Sure.
And now there are people who aren't part of that world who get to see it. And it's the same thing with Insecure, life south of the 10 in Los Angeles.
Well, let's talk.
We've been here.
Let's talk for a moment about Insecure, because I think that's groundbreaking in so many different ways. Have you been on it since the very beginning?
I have. And in fact, when I started writing for the web, the first web series I wrote for, Misadventures of Aqua Black Girl, was created by Issa.
Oh, is that right?
Circle. I now write on her show.
Oh, wow. So that's how that is, by the way, for anyone listening, that is how the business works. It's you meet people, and those people help you, and you help others that you know, and it's all about those connections. And so I'm glad to hear that that's how that worked, because that is how the business operates. You have to have talent, that you've got to have that, but it then requires you having a circle of, they don't have to be intimate friends, but people that you know and have worked with and who trust you and you trust them. And clearly that's happened for you, so that's exciting to know. Let's talk about working on Insecure for a moment. How does that work? Is it table writing?
So what we do, we have a room, and then so the writer's room, we all gather together and break stories together.
Okay.
But then each writer goes off and writes their script by themselves.
Good.
And then brings it back to the room, and then we all punch it up together in the room.
And how many days? How many days a week do you punch up? How many days a week are you at the table?
I mean, it varies by script. Some. Because also there's so many checks and balances. Like you do the first, and on an HBO show, it's almost less like punch up, because I think network shows, it's more about like, let's beat all our jokes and let's take these jokes that we thought we loved out and put in some that are inferior. It's like a lot of like joke. I don't know what to call it. Like joke cannibalism, I think, very often. But like on a cable show where story matters as much as funny, very often you aren't so much punching up as you do that, but it's also like finessing the story and finessing the character.
Well, Insecure, for certain, as an example, Insecure is really about character and situation much more than it is about jokes, and it's very deeply heartfelt, and we feel for these characters very deeply when we watch. And so it really is about the characters and how they react to one another and what they're going through. And, that is different than a typical, let's call it a prime time sitcom on one of the major four networks that we're most familiar with. And so, you're definitely taking it into a different place. I love the fact that there's this incorporation of the world of texting and the phone, and that we see the texts, and that all that comes up. Whose idea was that? Was that Issa Rae's?
Yeah, that was Issa's idea. And it's so funny because it's like a point of conversation every time we shoot that, because Melina Matsoukas, who's our producing director, and she's a true visionary and artist, and she's given the show such a cinematic style that is like very, very cool and unique for television. But Melina, in terms of like composing the visual aesthetic of the show, is like, this show is slick and cool and texting is not. So for her, she's like, do we got to show this on screen? And Issa's like, yes, that's the show. That's what we do. We're millennials. We text. We need to show it. And she's like, so we've got to have a screen of someone looking at a screen of someone looking at a screen. And you're like, yup. And so it's so funny because they always have the conversation as if it is a conversation, but it is like, it's like threaded, it's woven into the show. This is what the show is and how millennials communicate.
Sure.
And so, it was Issa's vision to be like, look, you can't escape your phone as a 20-something or 30-something. It's part of your world. So we have to figure out a way to incorporate it, not avoid it.
Do you enjoy working on a staff versus, writing it at home alone?
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God. You have like 10 friends to help you? Oh, it's the best. It can be challenging on challenging shows, or like in, even sometimes, I've worked on shows where everyone got along, but it was just like hard to move it up the hill because there's so many notes processes with like the network and the studio and all these other people and the pod and the producing director and the producer and so many voices. So there are times in terms of process, writing alone is faster because you're just like, I want to write, and then you do it.
Of course.
You're done. But writing on a staff is like, you get into TV because you want to collaborate. It's about working with people who make your smart brain even smarter.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I've never heard anybody put it that way. You want to get into TV so that you can collaborate. I think that's very important for people to understand, that process of working with people on a daily basis is quite different than a lot of writers experience where they are working at home alone. And you've done both. You've sat at your computer in your house and worked with nobody around, and it's a very different experience than when you're around a whole bunch of people, because you do feed off that energy. It's a different energy. Yeah. When you are, I'm curious about the room. I love room writing. I've known lots of people that have done a lot of it. And from your perspective on this show in particular, on Insecure, is it challenging in the room to be heard? You have to sort of make your voice heard above the crowd, or is it very sedate and everybody gets their turn? How does it work?
Insecure is truly a special room where our bosses, Issa and Prentice Penny, our showrunner, who directed last night's episode 204,
yes.
Hella LA, and he's amazing. They really instill in us like a sense of I don't want to say importance, but equality. A sense of equality, like everyone's voice matters, everyone is important, everyone has something to share. It's such a unique room in that, like, you don't feel less than no matter what level you are, because someone is going to say, hey, listen to what the staff writer said, that was amazing. Hey, listen to what the EP said, we didn't like it. You know, it's like everybody's equal. Everyone can be challenged or pushed up at any given time. It can be hard, though, even in a room like Insecure where everyone's amazing. We have 12 writers. It's loud. It gets real loud. And it's like, and that's any show with that many writers, it can get very hectic. So my favorite days are when we split up. Once we start breaking episodes, we split up into 2 rooms, and one room will be the rewrite room, and one room is the story breaking room. And that's really nice because then there are only 5 other voices besides yours, and that becomes a lot more manageable. And there's actually even some moments of silence where we're like thinking, and that's kind of nice. You know, those are really cool moments. So yeah, it's a special room, but I do know, I know one of my first jobs in this industry, I was a showrunner's assistant on Happy Endings, which is an amazing, amazing show, canceled before its time, pour one out, and that show had 16 writers.
Wow.
It's like the very few times they were all in the same room, I would be in another room at my desk, like waiting to answer a phone, and I would get anxiety from hearing them talk over each other. I was like, that is too much. But they would very often break up into 3 rooms. You know, there'd be a joke room and a punch room and a rewrite room, and it's like there'd be, that made no sense, a joke room, a rewrite room, and a story room. And yeah, so it's like anytime you get to break up, you're like, oh, thank God, I get to be heard.
Well, that's always one of the things that people talk about in room writing is sometimes you've got to have sharp elbows to get yourself heard. And so I'm glad to hear that your room in Insecure is not quite like that, though there are enough of you where I guess some writers tend to be quiet people. And if you're a quiet person, probably your ideas don't get heard so quickly in a room like that. And
the tactic for that is push it up the ladder. So, for instance, when I was a staff writer, I made sure to sit next to a consulting producer on the show so that if I had an idea, I would tell it to him, as opposed to trying to be heard over the din of 11 people. I would just say, let me tell it to this upper-level writer right next to me. If they like it, they'll say it. And it doesn't even matter if they get the credit. It's just a matter of hey, here's a testing ground for my little idea and my tiny voice. You know, it's because when I was a staff writer, I had a very tiny voice. I was so terrified to talk all the time. And I was like an alien on the first show I worked on. I was not myself, and I felt very uncertain every single day. And it was because everyone tells you, oh, you can be fired at a moment's notice. And so I was filled with fear. And so I was here, how do I get anything I'm saying heard? And so I was just tell it to this guy next to me and see if he liked it. And then every now and then he would pitch it. Sometimes he would give me credit, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes it would succeed, sometimes it would fail, but it helped me. And I find on Insecure it's the same. There are definitely times where the staff writers who I sit next to will lean over and say, hey, I was thinking this is a stump. And I'm like, no, it's great, say it. You know, and then if she doesn't get the notice that she deserves, then I'll just say, hey, our staff writer had a great idea. You know, and it's just I'll say her name, but I don't call her the staff writer.
Something.
But just those opportunities to be speak it up the ladder and see if it gets traction.
I think that's a fantastic technique, and something tells me, I don't know what it is, Amy, something tells me that your voice is heard now, that you're much louder. I don't know what tells me that.
Thank God. Yes, it is heard much more now. I still have, but those feelings of uncertainty never go away. And I think someone told me when I was starting out and I was terrified to speak, I would go at lunch and have to get Kleenex and dab off my armpits because I was so sweaty. I was terrified. I still to this day have deodorant that is my office deodorant because I get scared. When things don't go my way, I get scared. But so those feelings, someone told me when I was starting out, like, don't worry, everyone else is more worried about themselves. Like, when they drive home, they're not thinking about your bad pitch. They're thinking about theirs. And at the time, I was like, really? But they all pitch really great stuff. And then one day I had kind of did an experiment and just was sort of listening and realized that the older writers in the room, the more senior writers, they pitched more than me, but in like ratio, they had the same number of things fail.
Nice.
It's just I would pitch 3 things and 1 or 2 wouldn't go, and they would pitch 20 things and 18 wouldn't go. And I was like, oh, they just pitch more, but they're also not getting everything in either. And so that brought me like a little bit of comfort, and like even now being, a mid-level / senior writer, I am realizing like I still get scared when my stuff doesn't go. I'm like, do I even know the show at all? I'm a failure. It's like I still feel that. It just never goes away. I think people don't realize, but writers are very sensitive.
Can I tell you something that I hate to say this, but it's true. I'm a little older than you, and I've been around a little bit longer. That feeling never really goes all the way away.
Right?
It just doesn't. It doesn't. You're always, first of all, you're always reinventing the wheel every time you write a new show. If you're writing a wholly original new work that has nothing to do with an existing show, that's really reinventing the wheel. But every episode you write is a reinvention of the wheel, and you're starting from a blank page again. So you're always on the edge of that risky situation. So I think
it can be really scary.
I think people don't understand that's what happens. I'm curious. Let's talk for a moment about the webisodes you've done, because you've created how many webisodes?
So I've created 2 web series. And then worked on a 3rd web series, and then each one one of the series ran for 1 season and had 6 episodes, and then another series, that was The Slutty Years. That was the first one I created.
The Slutty Years? The Slutty Years.
Yeah, and it was based on Girls Who Were Not Sluts. It's just, hey, great title. And it was about 20-something girls who wanted to come out of their shells and didn't know how. Mm-hmm. So they had a friend who was their quote unquote slut friend who was supposed to teach them how to flirt and get guys. And it's fine. But it did help me learn to create and work on my own stuff, which mm-hmm. led me to creating a 2nd web series called Lisa Name Your Black. Right. I co-created that with one of my closest friends in the world. Her name's Lisa McQuillan, and I met her at UCLA.
And I met her. We went to I met her there too. That's where we all met.
Exactly. So I remember when I was starting at school, there were 24 people in our class, and 10 of those were television, and 2 were comedy, and it was me and Lisa. And so it was almost destined, and she's black, and so it was almost destined that we were supposed to be friends. And I always say when people go to school, they're like, oh, I'm going to network. Oh, I'm going to get an internship. Oh, I'm going to write 9 scripts. Oh, I'm going to get a movie deal. People have all these things that they want. And I'm the point of going to grad school is to find your tribe. The point of going to school isn't to finagle a green light, because you don't have control over someone else saying yes to your story.
Absolutely
What
not.
you do have control over is having a group of friends that you trust, that you can say, hey, how's my story doing?
Yep.
And then you can help each other get better and bring each other up. I think a lot of people spend a lot of energy trying to network up, trying to find people in places of power who can lift them up. And really what we should be doing at school is networking across. Finding your people.
Thank you for saying that, because I try to tell that to my students all the time, that school, I completely agree with you. You're 100% right. School is really, it's at least 50% or more about the socialization and who you meet and who becomes your lifelong friends and colleagues and collaborators. And that's what school is for. You're going to get a certain amount of education in school, but that's not its primary purpose. Its primary purpose is to orient you in the world of what you want to do. And I think that that's how you go about meeting people and how you socialize and how you interact. That's really very important, and school really does that well.
And so for me, part of the tribe that I met, there are so many people, wonderful people I met, you included, but then also Lisa, who I worked on Lisa and Amy Are Black with, and that web series has gotten both of us jobs.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. That web series has actually been instrumental to your careers, has it not?
100%. We created it, and I know I had a meeting at HBO for that show Brothers in Atlanta, and the executives watched the web series, and then they sent it to the showrunners for Brothers in Atlanta, and they watched it, and then that's when they brought me in, And sure, they might have brought me in anyway from the script, but come on, it helped.
Oh,
and same thing for Lisa. We created that, and she was an assistant on Blackish. We put it out, and a few months later, they staffed her.
Nice.
And it's like maybe they would have staffed her anyway, but seeing that people are working on stuff and seeing that they have a voice and that they know their voice so well that they can create things with it on their own makes you all the more likely to want to give them an opportunity on a show.
Of course. You absolutely are expressing way more than what you can on paper. You're showing your determination, your abilities to actually do something with a camera and express yourself in a visual medium and not just on paper. I think that what you did is really where the future of pretty much all really successful people are going to come from doing stuff just like what you did. That's why I'm curious. How long did it take you to develop Lisa and Amy Are Black? How long did that take?
Oh my gosh. So it's so interesting because I'll talk to people who want to make web series and they're like, yeah, I want to write this web series and but I can't because I need a car to explode and I don't have the money to explode a car, so I guess I'm not going to make it.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa, what? You're the writer. Just don't write that part. So it was all about figuring out like how to write within your budget. Lisa and I, when we started working on the show, I had just gotten off, I want to say I just finished the Michael J. Fox show and was about to start Silicon Valley, and Lisa had not yet been staffed. So I was like, let's do a web series for $0. We'll figure it out. And I had the lucky luxury that my roommate at the time is, her name was Kalila Robinson, and she's a DP who has since gone to AFI. Like, she's phenomenal. And she was my roommate. So I was like, hey, Kalila, you have a camera, you have a small light kit, you have a bounce. Can we, work with you? And she was like, of course.
Oh, nice.
And so we made the web series. We shot most of it outside, so we didn't need lights or buy windows, so we didn't need lights. It all takes place during the day. Any cool location you see was an ask from a friend. We were mic'd because we borrowed mics, like lavaliers from friends.
Right.
So the web series cost the price of buying Kalila lunch every time we shot it, and that was it. And so, I love hearing people ask, like, what's your production cost? Like, how much should I have to make a web series?
Nothing.
And I was like, for us, the most important thing was the writing.
Yeah.
So all we needed was for it to be funny.
So
that's it.
What's the best special effect in your stories? The writing.
The writing.
You the performers,
yes,
performers and the writing. That's your best special effects right there.
Yeah, especially if you want to write comedy. I understand drama can be a little harder because you're like, I'm a sci-fi writer. How do I write sci-fi? But I always look back to one of my favorite movies, if not my most favorite movie, is Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino. And I read a book about him when I was first thinking about moving to LA, and it just has been seared in my mind. The fact that he said, look, I wanted to do a heist movie, but I didn't have the budget for the heist. So I just did everything after the heist. And I was like, that's so cool. He literally was like, I'm constrained, so how do I deal with my constraint and still tell a compelling story? And so most of the movie takes place in a warehouse because that's what he had.
Yeah.
And so I've always remembered that there should never be a chance where you as a solo filmmaker or writer are like, I don't have the budget and therefore I'm not going to do it. It's like, no, I don't have the budget, so how do I deal with those constraints? I think you can even tell a compelling horror or sci-fi movie without special effects. You just got to work on your creep factor.
Oh, definitely. There's no question. By the way, I think you did something also incredibly clever in that the two of you didn't just write it, you star in it. And so what you've done is you've put yourself in front of a camera so that people looking at the show, if they know that you have an interest in creating, producing, writing shows and so on, they now have a familiarity with you that they would otherwise never have had.
Correct.
So I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I had another web series that I didn't even mention because it was so dinky and small, but it was called How to Be an Adult. And it was just me talking to a camera for 30 days, or 22 days, because I knew a TV show was 22 episodes. So I wanted to do it for 22 days, and it's the first thing I ever shot by myself, and put online. And my first boss, Sam Laybourne of the Michael J. Fox Show, when I went in to meet with him, he hugged me and was like, I watched your web series. I feel like I already know you.
There you go.
And it was like such a warm, I relaxed so much.
There you go.
A level of relaxation I would never again achieve. But like in that moment, I was so like, oh, the hard work is done. He knows I have a personality. He knows I'm a human.
It's that same thing. Without question, it's the exact same thing where people who are celebrities or stars, everybody knows them and feels like they know them, and the celebrity, they don't know anybody, and so it's the same thing. The people that saw you do those webisodes, they felt familiar with you, and so they felt comfortable with you. That is a brilliant thing that you did, and you pulled it off in a way that wasn't insulting to anybody. You weren't being mean-spirited in any way. It was very clever, very clever. So okay, so you've worked with lots of people at this point in the business, and you've been around it for long enough that you surely must have some kind of a weird or a quirky or an oddball story that has happened to you. I'm just curious if you have anything you can kind of tickle our brains with.
I'm trying to think. I feel like there was one moment that stands out to me from the Michael J. Fox Show. I've talked about it a lot now because it's like the first big show that I worked on.
Right.
And I was down. We shot at Silver Cup Studios in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole writing staff moved to New York to work on the show. And it was the same place where 30 Rock shot. It's like a kind of an iconic studio, and our crew was mostly 30 Rock crew. They're amazing. And there's one day where someone told me, like, you are managing set, like you're going to be covering set because it's your episode. So I'm walking down to set, and as I'm walking on a set, I'm seeing all these PAs whispering into their lapels, the writer is here, the writer has arrived, the writer has arrived. And I was all like, what is happening? And I was like, what is happening? Why does this matter? And then suddenly I see Michael J. Fox walking off set right towards me, and they're like, Michael is coming towards the writer. And I was like, okay. And he walked right up to me, and he asked me like the most benign question of all. He was like, hey, so this line in the script starts with me saying like, hello. Is it okay if I say hey instead? And I was like, yes. What I want to say was like, you're Michael bloody fucking Fox. Like, you can say whatever the fuck you want. I am blessed to be here. But I was just like, I think that would work really well. I like the casual attitude. And he was like, okay, great. And in that moment, I was like, why in the world did he ask me that? And I was like, I can't believe it. And then I realized it was to empower me. At least that's what I think in my mind, because everyone saw him come up to this young person who the day before everyone had mistaken for a PA and had thought, like, everyone was like, hey, are you a background actor? Go that way. And he introduced the whole crew to me by doing that. And I was like, he's not only is he the nicest guy in the world, but that moment stood out to me, and like, that's how you empower people, is like letting them know that their opinion matters and giving them stage space in front of people who matter.
Yeah, the only thing that you might have done that would have been better is say, hey, why are you asking me this? Just say the line as the way it's written.
Exactly. I'm like, what are you talking about? Are you the writer? Just be like, last I checked, my name's on the front of the script. He would have said, last I checked, the show's named after me.
Yeah, he can say it. He can say it any way he wants. It does have his name on the show, So that's very funny.
It was such a sweet thing to do, and it was so weird. And from that day on, I was like, hey, everybody knows who I am. When I come to set, they know it's me.
Absolutely right. So we're coming toward the end of today's episode. This has just been such a treat and so wonderful to talk to you about your career and how you've blossomed into this really successful writer. It's really fantastic, and I know we're going to see a lot of amazing things in the future from you, and that we're going to see you creating big hit shows, and that I'm truly looking forward to that. And I'm wondering, in your experience, if you have a piece of advice or a tip or something that you can lend to our those writers or people in the business that are trying to figure out how to become successful. Is there something you can give them?
Yeah. Actually, if I could give a few, I'm just going to give a few.
Okay.
I already said network across. That's like one of my biggest things.
Mm-hmm.
Is like just everyone stop trying to ask the president of CBS to read your script. Ask your friends. Network across. But then the other two, I'll say do things before you're ready. Danielle Lurie, who's a Stanford alum, I went on a trip to Hollywood, and a group of us spoke to her, and that was her advice. She was like, everyone told me not to make a short because I didn't have the budget. And she was like, I just started. I just wrote it and did it. And if had I not, it never would have happened. And also, do it before you're ready, because if you don't, someone else will. And that means with anything. Like, if you want to shoot, just shoot it. Get a camera this weekend, shoot something. Because the first attempt will never be great. Just do it before you feel like you should. And then eventually you will feel like you should have. And then the second thing I would say is be kind and stay in touch. I think people make the mistake of thinking, like, who do I need to get ahead? Oh, I don't need this person. And it's like, what is that? Like, be friendly, make friends, because especially as a TV writer, your job is to be sociable and get along with people, and you interact with over 100 people a day. And if you can't be nice to 100 people in a row, then you're going to have a hard time, like, dealing with being in TV. And then the stay in touch part, I think when I was starting out at UCLA, there was a wonderful writer named Danielle Sanchez-Whitfeld. She's the outgoing showrunner for The Carmichael Show, rest in peace. And she also went to Stanford and also went to UCLA. And I would email her like every quarter and let her know what I wrote and what I was up to. Sometimes she would reply, sometimes she wouldn't. And I was always like, I don't even know if she gets these emails, but I'm just going to keep on doing it. Oh, well, we have something in common. So I just did. And then fast forward to after school, I'm interviewing for my first like assistant job with a writer named Hillary Winston, who is fantastic. She ran Bad Teacher a couple years ago,
right.
And is writing the Barbie movie now. And she decided to hire me after this interview, which was great. And then before I started, emailed me, and she was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I'm already hiring you. But my best friend in the world is Danielle Sanchez-Whitfeld, and she says that she knows you and loves you. So now I'm like doubly excited to work together. And I was like, the fuck? I was like, I've never even met this woman. And it was so wonderful. Like just the fact that I stayed in touch, and she remembered my name, and she knew that I was working on stuff. Because I never send an empty email. I'm never like, hey, how are you doing? I was always like, I wrote a script. I did this. I saw your episode. You're so funny. Love this show. It was like always just reminding her I was around and interested in what she was doing.
Very smart.
And it ended up like helping. So yeah, stay in touch. And even if they don't reply, never ask for a job. Everyone knows why you're staying in touch. Yeah. They know what you want.
Very, very smart.
Stay in touch.
Very smart. Well, I've been speaking today with Amy Aniobi, one of the really bright lights coming through the world of comedy writing in Los Angeles and Hollywood right now. And I think the future is going to see a lot more of Amy, and I hope I hear a lot more from her too. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Amy. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody, keep writing.
Today's StoryBeat tip. Stories can only allude to or portray the truth. They present a kind of truth or the illusion of truth. In short, stories give the impression of truth. Stories can feel like the truth. They can even express truths. But only the truth is the truth, and truths are frequently subjective and open to interpretation. Stories can only be facsimiles of reality, memories of some truth, or fictionalizations of the truth. The writer, director, cast, cinematographer, production designer, editor, and everyone else who influences how movies get made can and do put their stamp on any story, even on documentaries that are based on reality. Objective news stories are written through a journalistic or editorial lens. It's unavoidable. Writers of fiction are permitted to make stuff up. Writers often get paid, sometimes extremely well, to tell tall tales. Writers of all stripes are permitted, even encouraged, to lie. Take advantage of that. Screenwriters, in particular, lie for a living. It's perfectly acceptable for us to do so, but only in a story. Feel free to find a compelling way to tell the truth in your stories, even if that means lying through your teeth. And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.